Join us at Paranormal M, where every tale reveals a new side of the supernatural. Subscribe and stay tuned for spine-tingling episodes that will leave you wanting more. The journey into the unknown begins now. The horse that disappeared into thin air. Last Monday, I was at the clinic. I was checking on my dad, and I decided to stay the night with him to keep him company. We started to talk about all sorts of things. And then I mentioned to him that I had the creepiest sense of deja vu prior to coming into the clinic. One thing led to another. We went on talking about the brain and false memories and so on. Then my dad told me one of the weirdest things that he's ever experienced. It was back in his 20s. He never told anyone anything about this before, so I was intrigued. He said he was still a college student at the time. It was the holidays for our country. We came back to his hometown. He had some old friends who invited him to their place for dinner. We stayed up with them until around midnight. Then he left to go to his parents' house. My dad's hometown is small. People don't hang around the streets, especially that late in night and fall. He remembered walking and then hearing the sound of hooves clicking against the concrete sidewalk. He looked behind him and he saw a horse. The horse didn't have a saddle or bridle on, and Dad said it was a typical dark brown horse. The kind your mind would conjure up whenever you thought of the word horse. Dad thought that it must have had run off from somewhere. He didn't know any of the farms around the town, and the horse kept walking. It moved past my father, paying him no attention. Dad was confused, so he followed the horse. The horse took a turn. My father went after it. Only he found absolutely nothing. The turn the horse took was a dead-end alley. Dad said that there were no doors or really passages or side buildings or anything, just a plain dead end. The horse was nowhere to be seen. The sound of its hooves disappeared. Dad was so creeped out he ran all the way home. And to this day, he has no idea where that horse came from and where it even went to. I've only seen one ghost horse, and it was white and fluttery. I'd knock on some doors there. I clearly remember dying. Why am I still alive? I want to say this before I start. I'm a 28-year-old female, healthy of body and sound of mind. I don't do drugs, I don't drink, and I'm not under any form of medication. I haven't experienced anything paranormal in my life, except for that one dorm room in which I lived back when I was in college. Even then, I never saw anything, just felt something, which my roommates also experienced at the time. With that out of the way, I'm going to tell you exactly what I went through. A week ago, about 2 in the afternoon, I'm coming down the stairs and from the second floor to the first floor in order to feed my dog and cat. With startling clarity, I remember tripping. I tripped on the way down, falling and breaking my neck. I have the recollection of that event in my brain, which is the weirdest part. Next thing I knew, it was almost as if somebody pressed a rewind button, and I was back halfway through the stairs. Only this time I didn't trip. I walked down normally, and once I reached the first floor, I felt so weird, like I was almost outside of my own body for a moment. I freaked out for a while, and I started to question my sanity. Eventually, I moved past what happened, fed my pets, and just kind of busied myself with paperwork. That day, my cat, who's usually very aloof, kept following me around the whole day, staring at me constantly. He even slept on the bed that night. experience is even this. Odd experiences my whole life, plus Fort D.E. Here's one of the earliest things that happened. I was in high school, maybe 16, 17. I was at a friend's place, staying overnight. I went to a Catholic school, and this happened to be a very Catholic family. We were eating dinner, and there was a lull in the conversation. And I thought, oh crap, I have to talk about something. I was pretty self-conscious at the time, and apparently thought it was my responsibility to be chatty. Anywho, I racked my brain trying to think of something to say. I couldn't come up with anything. Started looking around the room for something, anything I could talk about. I saw the tapestry of Jesus on the wall, and I said, incredibly lamely, "That's a pretty nice tapestry of Jesus." My friend's parents turned around and looked at it and nodded, said something enthralling like, "Yes, and thank you." Awkward silence fell again. Maybe 2 seconds later, the entire thing fell off the wall onto the floor. Everyone kind of jumped. We all looked at the blank spot in the wall. The parents looked back at me, and the dad said, with a great deal of disbelief, mind you, "The tapestry fell off the wall. That's never happened before." And I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to say." Some folks would likely think this was a coincidence, but around that time in my teens and high school, things were falling down around and on top of me all the time. Like I was once sitting in our tiny study, and I was on the floor, and I was watching TV. All of a sudden, the damn glass sheet of the light in the ceiling fell down in my lap. It's the kind of light where you have to unscrew 3 screws to release it properly. A heavy chipboard poster of a Lamborghini, I believe, so 80s. It fell on me while I was sitting in my bed once out of nowhere. When I found out my grandpa died in my teens again, I was distraught, sobbing in my room about how I never got to say goodbye. Shortly afterwards, my mom and my brother started talking about how they heard footsteps coming up the wooden stairs and down the hall and stopping outside my parents' door. I never even heard them. Apparently, Mom opened the door once, thinking it was me or my brother, and no one was there. They heard this over and over. They heard bangs and things as well. And one night when we were eating dinner together downstairs, we heard this loud banging noise on the stairs. We all looked at each other and said her cat's name, but her cat was actually outside. We figured it was probably Grandpa. Mom had the house exorcised, and the noises never came back, and personally, I think it was probably a little rude. I have heard knocking and tapping near my bed frequently, with no apparent source, both when I was young up to when I was in my mid-30s. I have seen 4 ghosts in my life, but I've only heard one speak. The first ghosts I ever saw were 2 males in workman's gear, probably from the mid-1800s. I'm not really sure, but it certainly wasn't the 1990s, which is when I saw them. I was doing seasonal work at a ski resort in Montana at the time. It was a fun job. I was living in an old dorm-style housing just down from the main resort. I was sleeping, and I woke up knowing that there were some people looking at me. I saw these 2 men who were standing in the room, one older and a little taller than the other, both wearing pretty distinctive hats, almost like old railway engineer hats, kinda, and they were pointing at me. So I pointed to them, trying to reach them. They slowly disappeared. They looked as if somebody had taken a grayscale photo and just sort of overlaid it into the room. Lots of detail, no color. They didn't say anything, just pointed. I felt no fear at all. And by the way, I know what went in it, though, it felt like a person who was in, kind of a little bit of an irritated mood. The head was there for maybe half a minute. Then she just faded away, like the guys I mentioned above. It didn't freak me out because I knew that it was only able to, see that much of her. I didn't see it as only a head floating around. Just only the part I could see. I told my hubby about it when he came back. He took the computer that was on the opposite side of the room off its screensaver. It suggested I'd actually seen the picture of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. He had it on his desktop. I just calmly explained that no, the head wasn't that low. It was up there. And that her hair hadn't been anywhere near as cool. It was also mostly in profile. The lady had been looking right at me. The last time I saw a ghost was when I was extremely distressed. We'd just found out that a family friend had been murdered. They knew who did it. The husband of the woman who had been murdered was going to come and stay with us for a while. I was basically drowning in how horrible this all was. I was downstairs in the study at a different house. I was crying, and I slowly realized that I could see the oddly negative shape of someone sitting in the computer chair. They were diagonally across from me. I stopped crying very quickly because I realized that I could actually see the head of this person. Their legs over the chair, their arms on the armrests. But there was no detail at all. This was a brightly lit room. It looked like a featureless shape of a person sitting there, but in a weird, negative way. Not dark at all, it's just very hard to describe, really. The closest thing I can think of is like the invisible camo from Predator, with less choppiness. I stared at this person, blinking, and I said, "What?" I said it out loud, and it slowly faded. I was confused more than anything, but also strangely comforted. Lastly, the only ghost I've ever heard speak that I know of was in Fort Delaware. It's in the Endicott. I had 2 visits to Fort Delaware as I worked in the park at the time. The first was for a Halloween tour. I'll explain that in a minute. The second was as an emergency stand interpreter during an actual ghost hunting tour. It was organized after the Ghost Hunters episode. It was an interesting tour. I had to learn about the history and the use of the rooms pretty quickly while we took the ferry over. We basically moved from room to room, as did about 6 other groups staggered across the fort. At each stop, I would talk about the history, and then the Ghost Hunter crew member, a local ghost hunting outfit, by the way, not the actual ghost hunters, they would start asking questions and watching a little light-up doohickey for responses. Nothing really big happened on most of the tour, but I'll never forget the sound I heard when I was passing through the Endicott, right near the spot where that footage was taken of the soldier and where GH caught something on the floor. This was before I saw the episode. A guy had gone in front of me and the rest of the tour was way ahead. It was really dark in that spot, but we had flashlights. I heard it was from my right, and it was something very whispery, very raspy, and it spoke 2 syllables. I asked the guy when I was through, then, asked him about that bit, if he'd ever heard it, and he said no. I have no idea what it said. My name is 2 syllables long, but frankly, it could have been anything. Weird sound. I'm sorry this is so damn long, but I have one more thing to say. I found it utterly hilarious and a little bit irritating when I finally watched the Ghost Hunters episode based at Fort Delaware. The first one, I guess. That's because they mentioned a ghost account by a lady who saw a lamp fall off a table. They dismissed it immediately as she just knocked it off the table. No, I was on that tour. I was busy walking back and forth on the roof to the fort, on the left-hand side beyond the big guns if you're looking at the drawbridge. The swinging lantern, or rather swinging a lantern while dressed up as a Union soldier. This was during a Halloween tour, before GH had been there. Halloween tours were totally for fun. We had mad scientists chopping up people in the Endigon. Ghosts and zombies everywhere. It was great. I was on the boat heading back when the lady told her story. She was an utterly normal, friendly lady in maybe late 50s. Her sole job was to wait in the officers' rooms under a window that faced the courtyard and scream when the group passed. She had been waiting for the next group to arrive, and there was a lamp on the table next to her. She was sitting there, not doing anything, just not even fidgeting or anything, not kicking out her legs, not moving. She said that out of the blue, that lamp was thrown off the table to the floor. It didn't fall. She didn't knock it off. She told everyone sitting with her on the boat because she was freaked out. Somehow that made it to the ghost hunters team and was dismissed just like that. It annoyed me so much watching that episode. Side note, the dude who met the crew at Fort Delaware was an amazing interpreter and a lovely man. He died a few years after the episode was shot, I believe. Okay, one last thing. The last part of the Halloween tour involved firing off the largest gun on top of the fort. Every tour they let someone else do it, and on the last tour they let me do it. I misfired that damn thing 3 times before they finally kicked me off and did it right. A dying dad sees someone special. My dad died in 2016. I was able to spend a lot of time with him before he went. And my brother and I sort of set him up in an amazing care facility in Australia. And that's where he was for a couple of months before he went. The place had a small cafe with a barista, and I would frequently go and grab his coffee. Dad couldn't walk anymore, and I was having a harder time getting him into a wheelchair to get him out of the room and outside. He also wasn't eating as much or interested in much of anything. This is all pretty normal for somebody who's dying. I knew he was, and I knew he'd go pretty soon. But nobody else seemed to think so for some reason. Anywho, I asked Dad if he'd like a latte. For the first time in a few days, he said yes. I was excited he was interested. So I headed over to the cafe and got us both a coffee, headed right back. I walked into the room and said, "Got your coffee, Dad?" I noticed Dad was staring at the far corner of the room. He looked from the corner of the room to me when I walked in. Then after I spoke, he looked back to the corner, back to me and said, "What about Mom?" My mom died in 2008. Now, since I've seen ghosts and had a bunch of weird experiences, I'm all aboard on this train. And without missing a beat, I look at the corner at him and I say, "I can get a coffee for Mom, no worries." Dad looked from me to the corner, back at me. The reality clearly dawning on him, then quickly shook his head. Well, my dad did have some confusion when he first came to this place. He settled down pretty quick, and he didn't see anything else that he mentioned and was lucid right up to the end. I'd like to think that Mom came to see him off. I knew it was a special place. One was a massive dump of all of my experiences. The other about a special visit my dying dad had before he died. This one just popped into my head today. I hadn't thought about it for a long time. I used to work in a state park and I loved it. So, while out on a hike with the school group, I found myself stopping at a section of the trail that I hadn't really paid much attention to before. So I stopped there and asked the kids to follow the other lead because there was something about that place. Couldn't really put a finger on it. It wasn't all that spectacular of a view, and the river had chewed away a great deal of the bank. I couldn't see any wildlife, but it felt important and special, and I realized that I loved that spot. I continued on with the kids and didn't think much of it. A little while later, my boyfriend, who I'd been with for a long while, asked if I'd like to go for a hike. I said, yep. And he said, let's go to your favorite spot. So I took him to that spot I really liked, closer to where he worked. That was much more scenic. We stood there and he asked if this was my favorite spot. And I thought about it and said, well, actually, there's this other spot I like. We hiked there. We stopped there. And I said that I didn't really know why I felt this was such a special spot, but it was. I really liked how the place felt. I turned around to find him getting down on one knee and holding out a ring. His proposal was lovely, and the ring was perfect, and of course I started blubbering like crazy and said yes, and honestly, probably should have guessed that he was going to do this because he got dressed up too. But it's like I knew something very special was going to happen in that place. And it's a little funny too that the only reason it happened in that place was because I felt something special was going to happen there. I've had little quote-unquote knowings like this my whole life, but this one will always stand out. It was oddly nice. The night I'll forever remember. This happened 8 years ago at my grandparents' ancestral house. Apart from the usual mischief of the duende, which is Spanish and Latin American counterparts of gnomes, I think, our house rarely displays apparitions from the other world. We have a superstitious belief that we should never leave a house without any person or people for a long period of time. If you do, someone or something might live there, i.e. malevolent spirits. Our house was built in the later 70s. The ground floor was used as our living quarters, while the upper floor just gathered dust. That's because I have only my mom and my brother residing there in a single room for the time being. This is how our second floor looks like. Sorry for potato drawing. I want to see it. One night I was talking to my significant other through the phone, and I was on the second floor of her house. I went there because of privacy while also maintaining the silence on the ground floor. The time, if I recall, was past midnight. We've been always talking like this from the evening to the wee hours in the morning. As I'm trying to make her laugh, I saw a tentacle-like white, grayish, long, thin fitting through the jalousie window, or jalousie. The one colored brown. I'm describing it as a tentacle because of the motion it makes. It's slithering of what I thought of at the time of its whole body forcing its way to come in. At first, my brain is still not that afraid because it might be a snake, for we have lots of trees inside our property. Notice I said tentacles, because I can't for the life of me relate that thing to a human hand. I just saw it as a long, white thing. You know how a grandma uses her hands to do Tai Chi? That's the way it was moving. Next thing I know, there's another long thing, which I now realized is its other hand to get inside also. What fucked my brains out was its head trying to get inside also. I'm afraid that's why I can't look at its face. My breath is not shallow. Well, I think my breath is now shallow. I can't think of anything. I'm stuttering, and my significant other noticed it too and asked why. I told her what I saw and said, keep talking to me. I shut my eyes, but once it opened, it just was still there. Now it's waving its hands and shaking its head vigorously, so it knows that I can see it. From my illustration, you could see that I'm sitting at the edge of the bed. I muster up my courage and I nudge myself a little so I won't be able to see him. I think I moved 12 inches to the right, just so I could remove him from my vision. You know what it did? It also moved to its right, which is another window, just so I could also see it. This this thing knows that I'm afraid. And in the beginning, the motion of its hand, it's like a Tai Chi grandma. Now it's dabbing to its right so I can see its both hands. Once that happened, I steeled myself and almost jumped to the stairs to go to my brother and mother. After a few moments, I asked him to go with me, but we didn't find anything. Seems nothing out of the ordinary happened. What bothers me up to this day is I can't remember if I looked at its face or just the peripheral vision, because every time I try to remember its face, I just see a blank face. No eyes, no mouth, no facial hair. Just blank. Up to this day, I don't know what kind of ghost it is, but typing this up until 3 a.m. gives me the chill. My experience with a team of paranormal investigators. A few months ago, my uncle invited me to go to a well-known paranormal hotspot. It was with him and his group. I've always been open-minded about the paranormal, and I've had other experiences with what I believe to be spirits or ghosts. The place in question is an old, out-of-use prison, used to hold political prisoners and murderers, etc. Me and my uncle arrived first, and so he thought he would show me around. We walked down every wing, every long, dark hallway, leading from the main foyer. All the prison cells on each side, of course. The least frightening experience was when I had seen a dark figure standing there. I looked at my uncle, looked back, and it was gone. This is when I realized my belief in the paranormal had been well placed. He then showed me to a room, or cell. The reason I call it a room is because it was the most luxurious cell. It had comfortable pillows, a big soft mattress, and a bookcase on top. The very bookcase, which when slid over leads to the room the prisoner would be hanged in. The noose came from the ceiling, and a large glass type of floor came down and led to the coffin room. Before my uncle showed me what was behind the bookcase, I seen a huge white flash. It come from the cracks behind the bookshelf. I get chills as I'm writing this. After my uncle opened the bookcase, I seen a large black figure peek over his shoulder. This terrified me. It seemed normal to him. And by the way, nowhere in this prison had good lighting. So when your eyes adjust to the dark, you can really see silhouettes in the dark. Under the prison, there's a large and long and dark tunnel that led to the old courthouse across the road. As an initiation, they made me walk to the end of the tunnel with all the lights off, knock the rusty metal door at the end, and say, "Sir." And when I came within 5 feet of that door, I felt a horrible feeling, like something was waiting for me. I strongly hesitated, but I knocked the door and asked for "Sir." As I walked briskly back to the group, I heard them all exclaim. They said something walked back with me, a dark figure. I didn't believe them until someone else done it, and I promise you, a large black figure came slowly from the wall and walked behind him. I thought, well, because it was so dark, it was just another person walking with them. Until I remembered he walked down alone. Do we have a ghost? So this has been going on for many years, but I just ignored it since it happened like 3 times, but now it's way more common, and it's freaking me out. So I'll start with my first experience, the closet. I was 12 years old, I think, and, well, me and my sister shared the room. It was summer and we were about to go to the beach. Since I'm a guy, I took my stuff and entered the closet. In that time, my sister left the house, and I didn't missed this, by the way. I changed and I was about to leave the closet, but the closet door just shut down so hard and I saw the movement of the door closing and I couldn't leave. I tried everything, but when I saw I just can't open it, I called my sister and said if she doesn't open the door, I will beat her and stuff. Boom, the door opens on its own. I was about to beat her in the room, but it was empty. Then I saw my sister out from the window. She said that she was out and was getting her bikini. We just laughed it off. The second experience was also in our room, but with my sister and 2 cousins. We bought so many sweets and treats and were having fun all evening. But then, we heard weird noise somewhere in the room, like sharpening knives. My little cousin got real scared, so we all just tried to tear him up. Now we went to sleep, and all night I heard someone walk across the room. I was too scared to check. In the morning, we sat down on the floor, and my older cousin said that she barely got any sleep because of somebody walking in the room, and I froze. Since she was on the floor, she could have at least seen who the person was walking, because, well, I was sleeping with my face to the wall. Younger cousin and sister didn't hear anything, but they did get scared anyways. After this, I had problems sleeping. Third thing was weird. It was 2 mirrors breaking all of a sudden on their own in the middle of the night. It's been years, really, and that happened, and the next things happened in the last 3 months. The glass of Coca-Cola just crossed this whole length of a table in front of my room. Sister and me, and we thought maybe the table glass moved. But then why didn't anything else move? My mom saw someone closing the bathroom door, thinking it was me. And I was in my room, and she was like, "Luca, hurry. Can't hold it anymore." Then I left the room and said, "What is it?" Mom entered the bathroom and it was empty. Now my room is divided by a wall, creating 2 rooms, one for my sister and one for me. And now when we want to talk, we use our phones. I had to study that night, but my sister wanted to play some tycoon on Roblox. And since all I have to do is be away from a keyboard and save money, I accepted. We were talking, we heard somebody washing the dishes in the kitchen. We were like, what the fuck, it's 2 a.m. When we checked, the kitchen was empty. My dad heard loud running footsteps in the hallway in the middle of the night. We don't know if he heard someone of us. My mom, sister, and I went to KFC for lunch, and we made sure everything was turned off, TV, lights, laptop. We closed the windows and locked the house. When we came back home, the TV was on. My mom was angry, but I know I turned it off. And the last one is the scariest. Happened last week. Me and my sister were home, and she was in her room. We were alone, and I was making food. I had some problems, so I really focused on what I was doing. "Come on," said my sister, or so I thought. And my dog barking. Well, I ruined it. Well, I didn't, he did. "Come on," said my sister, or so I thought, and I answered, "What now?" I didn't get an answer. Then something poked me in the shoulder, and I said, "Leave me alone, I'm doing something." Then again, something poked me in the shoulder, and I was like, "Lorena, leave me alone." And again, something poked me. I turned around and screamed, "Lorena!" But no one was there. Then I checked her, and she was in her bed. Or as they put it, in her bed. Hope not. Ghosts experiences. When I was young, probably around 8-ish, I was playing hide and seek with my friends. This was what I believe was the first paranormal experience I had that I remembered. So I went to the basement and hid. My friend came down, and I'll always remember since he went pale white and ran and just looked at me. I chased after him and was like, why did he run away? He replied that he saw a shadow of a person behind me. That's where I was hiding with the red eyes. I thought to myself, what the fuck? You left me there? This is why it stood out. Fast forward to me being 17 or 18. It was a Sunday. We just finished my roast dinner. Friends call me and went, shall we go to Pluckley Woods? The most haunted woods in the UK. I'm like, sure. So we drove down there. Got to the woods and was messing around, and then it got dark and the sun set. The woods literally went pitch black. These were the times where I didn't have a torch app on the phone. I had to take photos in order to get some sort of light. Shouted to my friends to meet them back at the car. As I was taking photos to avoid falling over, I noticed in the camera there's a green mist of some sort. Thinking it was a reflection on the trees and moss, I didn't really take notice of it. Even now I'm getting the chills writing all these down. As we all got in the car, I was just like, lads, look at these photos. Started swiping from the beginning. Sure enough, that mist was swirling around and starting the outside and coming in the middle of the screen as the photos kept moving to the next one. Then it turned into a face, similar to the Mummy movie with its face in the sand. As we all saw that, we screamed. Mainly, of course, because at the same time as we saw the face in the mist in the last photo, the inside car lights just started flickering randomly on and off. We drove away from that sharpish. I get the chills thinking about it now. Deleted everything, unfortunately, because I didn't want anything like that latching onto me. Or so I thought. Fast forward 4 more years, later in Germany. I get moved to a different room in the camp. Everything seemed fine, except in the middle of the night I started getting sleep paralysis. Waking up with the shadow of a person standing over me, pinning me down. The only way for me to wake up from that was to scream. Honestly, even screaming in that stage took a lot of effort. My roommates are like, what the fuck, and trying to rationalize things during the day. And this kept happening for another few days. At one point, I was like, fuck it. Show me what's the worst you can do. I felt my leg behind being dragged and just grabbed. Never dared it again. Went back to the UK for a few weeks on holiday. And even my mom was like, you screamed last night. I didn't even remember it. But I had a vivid dream of being choked and lifted in her hallway. So when I returned, I moved rooms. And even in that room at midnight, as I fell asleep, I just woke up again with the noise of some of the guys outside the block. I see a shadow in the corner of the room, and fuck me, jumped on top of me and grabbed my upper arms. Johnny screamed. Even the guy next door asked me what the fuck was that about in the morning. I showed him the bruises. I was glad that we moved to a different block then. We've had occasions where people hear showers are being turned on and off with no one there. So I went to Canada, forgetting about these terrible events. And as I got asked to stay for 3 weeks over Christmas to cover the calls and cells, I was like, sure, easy 3 weeks. And then 3 weeks holiday after. That Sunday, the last person to get moved out of the cell, so I was sort of free starting Monday, and I was just on call. So the first Monday night, I wake up to my duvet being pulled off me slowly. Honestly, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now. So the next day, I was like, fuck it, I'll leave the light on. I was the only person in that block. Imagine an old asylum. Those were similar to what we stayed in, converted into accommodations. Tuesday night I wake up again, and this time with the light on, and I see a shadow over me. Yeah, I kept my eyes closed. Wednesday onward, I had to resort to drastic measures. Literally kept myself awake till I passed out and watched funny movies. But I could hear it knocking in the middle of my wardrobes. Knock, knock, knock. No, it wasn't the radiator or plumbing, because trust me, I know the sound difference between them. I remembered my friend stayed last Christmas. It was due to guard duty, so I asked him if he experienced anything weird. His reply was it's a friendly ghost let in and accepted. He told me the exact same shit that happened to me as his personal experience. Having seen enough horror movies, it's 100% a no-no to let anything in. 3 long, grueling weeks of staying up till I passed out. Finally over, promised myself to never ever volunteer for that again. After a few years in the old room with the sleep paralysis, I met one of the guys who now had that sort of bed space. So the after party was at my old room, and I was like, this is my old room. Experienced anything weird here? His reply was, yeah, I've woken up to sleep paralysis. I had a shadow of a person standing at the end of my bed a few times. His short answer gave me sort of closure. I definitely wasn't crazy in imagining it to myself. I usually tell him this story to my friends, and one of them, who was a total non-believer, told me his experience. Well, if you want, let me know. I'll tell that too. Things we experienced in the house I grew up in, Ireland. I grew up in the countryside, literally in the middle of nowhere in Ireland. The house was originally a small cottage. My parents bought it before I was born, and they renovated it and added an extension on. There was 5 other houses on our country road, the closest being a large field away. I don't know much about the history of our house, the land it was built on, or the history of the other area. Other than an elderly lady lived in the cottage before my parents bought it. She passed away in a nursing home. The only information I have about the area is it was old, and it was a civil parish. Civil parishes are units of territory in the island of Ireland. They have their origins in old Gaelic territorial divisions. Some other things worth noting before I get into the experiences. Behind our house, across a newly built road, was an old graveyard, and then the ruins of an old church enclosed in a stone wall. And when I say old, I mean the gravestones were tipping over, sinking into the ground. You couldn't read the writing on them anymore. You could see the graveyard from mine and my brother's bedroom windows. On top of that, when they built that road, they built it when I was a kid, and it was like a new main road into town. Archaeologists discovered signs of an early medieval monastery, the site dating back between the 6th and 9th century, and they also found some old signs of medieval settlements, some artifacts like tools relating to that time period too, as well as undated burial activity, some scattered human bones and remains and bones of a boy they think was around 7 years old. In the field right next to our house was also the ruins of what looked like a small cluster of old stone houses too, and there was something similar further down the road. So, on to the experiences. Whenever we get together as a family, we always end up talking about the house and what we experienced. Moved out 6 years ago. I don't know who or what it was, but there was definitely more than one ghost in spirit. It seemed like a lot. I don't know if it has anything, to do with the graveyard and what they found, or the house or the land itself. I really don't feel like it was the woman that lived there before us either. My mom, dad, 2 brothers, myself, obviously, and, friends that stayed over all experienced something or got a weird vibe. Funnily enough, almost everything that happened in the new build on the part of the house, rather than the old part. And stuff happened outside, too. I would often feel like there was someone in my room, and I don't know why, but I felt like it was a man. I'd never chill in my room alone, and I'd dread nighttime coming to go to sleep. I just felt like someone was there. I heard what sounded like someone walking around. Not footsteps, but just like the movement of someone. I often felt like I was being watched inside and outside. Fair enough, it could have just been my imagination or me freaking myself out as a kid. On multiple occasions, I heard what sounded like children talking and playing, but no one would be there. On one occasion, I heard what sounded like a choir singing in the direction of the graveyard and church, and on a separate occasion, I heard what sounded like drums being played. It was like this weird repetitive rhythm. Hard to describe. Another time, I'm outside playing near the side of the house. I was kneeling down, and it was as if somebody threw a small stone and pebble. Not at me, but in my direction from behind. We had stone chippings in our garden. So I heard the stone land as if somebody threw it. It happened 3 times within 20 seconds of each other. I turned around, but of course no one was there. And on another occasion, I went to bed really early. That's when it was still bright out. I remember this so vividly I can even remember the duvet cover that was on. So I'm lying down, wide awake. It felt as if somebody poked me pretty hard. It was like a strong index finger poke in my lower back. I kind of froze, felt freaked out, didn't turn around and just convince myself it was one of my teddy's paws. I didn't think about it again until years later. From the living room window, my brother saw a man in a hat smoking a cigarette, standing outside leaning against a wall near the front door. He got up like, who the hell is that? Went out and no one was there, or anywhere near, and he didn't hear him run away. Could hear people move even the slightest bit on the stone chippings. Which brings me to my next point. On a couple of occasions, my ma'am heard somebody knock on the back door, but when she went to answer, no one was there. And again, she didn't hear them walk or run away. Another time, she saw the silhouette of someone, again smoking, who was through the window of the back door, as if they were standing outside the door. As usual, no one was there. On a couple of occasions, she felt as though someone was sitting in the back of a car with her when she left her house to go to the shop in late evenings. The feeling was so strong that she'd keep looking in the mirror and even stop the car and look under the seats to make sure no one was there. My dad, who's a skeptic, saw a black shadow down at the end of the hall go from one side to the other. My other brother felt like someone touched his foot in bed. And on a couple of occasions heard what sounded like somebody walking down the hallway and stopping outside his door. It was as if they were going to come in, but hesitating. He would call out to see who it was, but no one would answer. So it wasn't any of us. He would also see the hallway lights being turned on and off, and when he was outside around the back garden, he would get this sudden urge or feeling that he should let it inside, and he would run. Which is weird because I used to feel that way too. Our dog stared and barked at nothing a couple of times. And a friend of mine that stayed over hated when she had to wake up and use the bathroom in the middle of the night. That's because she felt like somebody was watching her from the end of the hallway. Alien creature in my backyard. I saw an unidentified flying object, thing/creature in my backyard last month. Can't find any explanation as to what it could be. I was inside her house finishing up some work, and I could see my boyfriend and her dog in the backyard through the back door window. Suddenly, I hear her dog barking. As I glance up to observe what was unnerving her, I realize that it's something flying alongside the back of her 10-foot fence. Quickly, I open the back door and walk into her patio. The creature was completely silent. It looked like 5 or 6 feet in the air, moving in a precise straight formation. And let me tell you, this thing was fast. My dog's a greyhound mix, and extremely agile, and even she couldn't keep up with it. It was a little less than a foot long, a centimeter or two thick maybe. I couldn't tell if it was glowing or if it was just the combination of the glow from our backyard lights and its perhaps golden tone gave off this illusion. Because it was flying, and clearly much faster than my dog, it wasn't acting like it was trying to evade danger. I had the feeling that it was fairly intelligent. It was almost playing with my dog like it was playing a game of tag. It flew back and forth 4 or 5 times in a straight line at about 20-30 miles an hour, I would say. My dog attempted to catch it, running at it, and just moved the opposite side of the fence. But once she started to catch up, it would start flying the opposite direction without even having to turn around. It flew in a smooth, unwavering manner, like when you point a laser at the wall and move it back and forth to get your cat's attention. Obviously, I wanted to get this on video, or at least a picture, but I wanted to get a closer look, because my mind needed an explanation. As I moved closer, it quickly flew over a fence. Never saw it again. But I could hear the bustling of leaves around the side of our house. After I knew it was gone, I looked at my boyfriend and his face said it all. I asked him what he saw to confirm that in my mind it just wasn't simply playing tricks. His experience was the same as mine. We both have been looking for this thing every night since we saw it, but to no avail. We still have no idea what this unexplained creature could be. Has anyone else had an experience like mine, or any explanation as for what it could be? If I'm unable to come up with an explanation or even a plausible theory regarding what I saw that night, I think it would bother me for the rest of my life. Possible run-ins with the Hat Man. I've just heard of the Hat Man, and I did some Googling, only to find that this Hat Man is some evil entity that many people seem to encounter, mostly during sleep paralysis. The part that gives me chills is when I read the description of what he looks like, and seeing images replicating those descriptions. He looks exactly like this shadow man I saw everywhere when I was a kid. I saw him from ages 7 to 14 when I lived in a 2-story house, which I shared a different encounter inside that house on the sub, by the way. Except I never saw him in my dreams, like a lot of others seem to. I saw him in the hallways. Anytime I didn't look down the hallway, I would just see him in my peripheral. For example, if I was walking in my room, I would see him slightly standing at the end of the walkway, opposite my room. It only ever happened if I didn't look down the hallways before walking past them. Just like what I read, this shadow man was just a black silhouette. No features except for a detective-type hat and a trench coat. Never once did it approach me. I would see it in my peripheral, and the second I'd fully look toward him, the figure would be gone. I also said that he feeds on people's worst fears, and if my shadow man was the Hat Man, he was very much feeding off my fear of a bad guy being at my house and waiting for the perfect moment to catch me. I was a really paranoid kid growing up. What are your thoughts? I still don't know too much about the Hat Man, but it seems pretty straightforward. More information is appreciated, though. Do you think this was really the Hat Man I was seeing as a child? The thing I always want to say about this guy is, well, some time ago everybody wore hats, so everybody who could be a ghost could be a Hat Man. At my house, and it still haunts me. About 2 years ago, I'm watching a movie at my sister's room. I saw some white figure at the window with my peripheral vision. When I looked out to the window, there was a faceless nun. Well, actually, I couldn't see her face, but I knew she was staring at me, dressed in an all-white habit with a red cross on her gwimp. Is that a word? It was not a crucifix she wore. It was a red cross printed like her gwimp. I was in shock. I mean, how could somebody get inside? To my sister's window, she'd need to pass through the house gate and walk 25 meters without being noticed. And well, how could she? When I looked down to pause the movie, she simply turned left, walked away, and disappeared. But that should not be possible. There's another locked gate and then a dead end. I barely slept that night. My eyes were watery and I was still in shock and telling myself it was just hallucination. Later that year, I'm drawing something, and when I realized I draw a freaking faceless nun wearing many crucifixes with this weird crown and her arms open like she was floating. About 3 months ago, I'm drawing a female figure with charcoal, and again I ended up drawing a nun, exactly like the last one. I decided to put on my closet door because, well, why the hell not? I'm hopeless, I know. My mom saw and hated it. Then I told her about the nun I saw years before. She told me that maybe I see apparitions. Maybe I'm sensitive because my grandma is. My mom said I should throw the drawing away, but I didn't. I left that in there. A few days later, I had a dream. I was in a big old house, and there was 4 nuns looking just like my drawing, and they were side by side. Their arms were crossed and staring at me. They were at the top of the stairs, swinging and oscillating back and forth. I woke up very scared. Later told my mom about that. She said I should burn the drawing, and so I did, and every now and then I can't stop myself from thinking about the nun. And on top of that, there's Grandma, right? She sees spirits and souls and all these things I don't understand very well. She used to do spiritist sessions and psychographic messages. I really don't know about these things, and oh yeah, there is this boy I've seen more than a couple of times wearing white too. I've never seen his face, just him passing by, never actually looking at me. Am I going crazy or what? Amityville Horror House, 112 Ocean Avenue. This is W. Work. Stay tuned for In Conversation. First, this bulletin from the WOR newsroom. 6 members of one family been found shot to death in their nightclothes in their expensive home in Amityville, Long Island. The only available information at this moment, according to the Amityville Village Police, is that the victims have been identified as members of the DeFeo family. They were found by 23-year-old son, Ronald DeFeo, who is believed to be the only surviving member of the family. 6 members of one family found shot to death in their home in Amityville, Long Island. We will have further details on the 11 o'clock news. This was the first radio broadcast to announce the murders in Amityville Horror House at 112 Ocean Avenue. The entire DeFeo family were shot by one of their own, Ronald. This terrible event would spark the start of a current-day legend. A legend around which 15 Amityville films were made. Ronald, to begin with, claimed that a hitman murdered them, whom he named. But this tale was proved wrong for the reason that the intended hitman was not in New York at the time of the murders. The very next day, Ronald confessed to having killed his family, all by himself. He stated, "It all started so fast. Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." What he called it started around 3 in the morning at 112 Ocean Street. Ronald took his .35 caliber rifle and psychotically shot his brothers, sisters, mother, and father. 1 bullet for his siblings, 2 for his parents. act normally. It wasn't until later that day at around 6:30 p.m. that Ronald opened up about the death of his family. While Ronald's story about the bloody event had been inconsistent, the most famous claim is that he had killed his family due to demonic voices in his head. At some point in his trial, Ronald's advocate set up a defense of insanity, which was supported by means of a court psychiatrist. Regardless, the judgment determined Ronald was both responsible and had control over his actions, sentenced him to 6 consecutive life sentences. In the following years, Ronald claimed that he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol when he executed the murders. In another model of the story, his sister Dawn was the murderer. His story has changed so often that the handiest reality, which we kind of now are certain of, is that Ronald DeFeo is a liar. Certainly, perhaps the most demonic issue of the Amityville murders is the creativeness of the killer himself. However, in spite of Ronald's terrible lies, there are things which make this case peculiar. All the victims had been located lying on their stomachs, without signs of struggle. Toxicology reports have proved that no sedatives were used, and police determined no proof of Ronald having used a silencer on his very loud rifle. How, then, did the DeFeos continue to be asleep in their beds as Ronald killed them one after the other? Dr. Howard Edelman, the examiner on the case, said that he was mystified as how a single gunman could have committed the crime. In reaction, there have been several competing theories, but none in reality satisfies the question of how Ronald went on a flurry of kills when the others were asleep. Even if the house did not already host an evil entity, being the scene of such a grotesque crime, it could have hosted one after these events. A bit over a year later, 112 Ocean Avenue, the scene of these dreadful murders, it became home to a new family. The residence, with all of its furniture intact, was sold to George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 kids. Although they had knowledge about the gruesome things that had taken place there, the Lutzes were positive, describing the residence as their dream home. They even set up a sign that named the house High Hopes. But they could only inhabit the house for 28 days. They would forcefully emerge from its partitions, running out in their nightwear, leaving behind all of their possessions and never returning. While you listen to any of the Lutz's testimonies, there's a feeling that they're saying the truth. On the very first day of moving into the house, the Lutzes commenced feeling as though something wasn't right. Family friend and neighborhood Catholic priest, Father Randolph Pecoraro, visited the house to perform a blessing. George told what occurred in one of his final interviews before his death in 2006. Whilst blessing, the priest was disturbed by a weird feeling he got in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Pecoraro told about it to George, who informed him that it'd be the stitching room. The priest, who supposedly appeared relieved, then stated, "That's good, as long as no one sleeps in there." Paranormal activities unfolded very soon. Within a week, Kathy's hand had been touched by something that we discussed and couldn't explain. It was just something unseen. Those are George's own words. We also had hordes of flies that would appear within the rooms. And no matter how many times we would kill them, they would reappear. Lisa added in the interview. It wasn't in the water. The floor itself turned black. And at first it was one bathroom, then another, and then telephone repairmen came 3 times because each time they tried to communicate with the priest, we could just run into faulty connections. George added in the interview. Time and again, noises jolted in family from their sleep during the night. George was the one who was disturbed the most. He described how the front door would violently open and close, and when he investigated, he'd see it locked with the dog asleep in front of it. chores became too much for her. Others have said how the house appeared to age Kathy, both mentally and physically. On the night that they fled the house, George claims to have witnessed his wife become an aged woman before his very eyes. The visage took several hours to wear off. Although it's too easy to push aside the Lutz's tale as a made-up one, the consistency with which they maintain their story makes it arguably believable. A documentary filmed in 2012 after the deaths of both Kathy and George has introduced additional proof and intrigue to the Amityville case. For the first time since 1976, one of the Lutz's youngsters, Daniel Lutz, came forward to discuss his childhood experience. Daniel has corroborated his mom's and stepfather's stories while adding some of his own. One of the most disturbing events, which was haunting him since the day it befell, was he saw the door of the boathouse open and shut repeatedly, with extreme violence. The family dog, Harry, with his pen behind beside the boat residence, was visibly disturbed. In an attempt to get away, he jumped over the fence and just apparently seemed to hang himself. After rescuing the dog, it took Daniel and George an amazing effort to close the door. It was then Daniel remembers one of the weirdest elements of his stories at Amityville. In the course of the interview, his own disbelief at what he saw, even a few years later, is quite obvious to look at. When the reporter asked, "What did you see? Was it in the window?" Daniel replied, "It would have been what looked like a cartoon character of an angry pig with wolf-like teeth." When he and George went upstairs to investigate, they found a rocking chair moving all by itself. Daniel claimed that he was possessed by a powerful entity in the house. Even after leaving the Amityville house, Daniel was sent to a Catholic monastic school by his parents. There, the priests performed exorcism rituals for a year to rid him of the demon which had possessed him in that house. I had just gotten in a flight with George about, I don't even remember anymore. So by the time I got to the second landing, I was projected up the stairs and to the wall. My mother was like 15 feet behind me. I know that the spirit of some other thing passed right through me. My mother was standing right there. She broke down and cried. That was the most horrible thing that she'd ever seen. I stand up and my body starts like I no longer have control of myself. She jumped around in shock like something just scraped her or touched her. And it entered into me, through me. And if I have to describe what it felt like, I would say it was a numbness after being shot. And like somewhere in the room it said, "It is you." It was like sub-bass, like a gargle and a crackle to it. And that stuck with me for at least a decade on a daily basis. Or the words from Daniel in the interview. On the last night the Lutzes spent at Amityville, an unseen force lifted Kathy and the two boys up with their beds. Daniel says he still remembers the sense of terror he felt as the headboard of his and his brother's bed smashed at each other in the ceiling. They were trapped on the beds as it levitated. This became the tipping point, and they couldn't tolerate it anymore. After 28 days of living with a constant feeling of terror, the Lutzes called Father Pecoraro, who suggested that they go away from the house and spend the night at another place. In March of 1976, psychics, paranormal researchers, and a news crew were allowed access to 112 Ocean Avenue. Amongst the investigators were Ed and Lorraine Warren. During the initial investigation, Lorraine got repulsed when she entered one of the rooms, which was later observed to have been the bedroom of Ronald DeFeo. Lorraine believed that even as numerous spirits roamed the house, there was one unique entity which was more powerful and more malevolent than the others. When we went into the house that day, we didn't realize that it was diabolically infested. This case had everything. It had the monstrosities of the night which roamed that house, which infested it, which caused a young man to murder his whole family, The Amityville case affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on. This is what the Warrens had to say about the house in an interview. The Warrens' photographer captured the notorious photo of a spectral kid in the doorway. A few have speculated that this is the youngest member of the family to be murdered in 1974, John Matthew DeFeo. Daniel Lutz states that each one of the hauntings was brought by George Lutz. In spite of denials during his lifetime, Daniel asserts that George was a person who enjoyed occult rituals. I think somewhere along the line that George's beliefs and practices and things that he was directly involved with triggered and was a catalyst to what was going on in the house. It was kind of like a magic trick gone bad that you couldn't shut off, said Daniel. He also states that George used to be an abusive stepfather, a reason that led him to leave the house at the age of 15. It was interesting that Daniel might corroborate the tale of a man who repulsed him and abused him as a child. His statements might give insights into why George preserved all the possessions of folks that had died in the residence before. Should it be that as a dabbler inside the occult, George knew something of the alleged power of death and blood? Possibly George Lutz had attempted to interact with this energy. In the process of interacting with the souls of the DeFeos, did George disturb something darker? As a result, did he unleash demonic forces which he couldn't control upon himself and his own family? Unfortunately, all we're able to do is raise questions. I won't drive again at night alone. I know I always say that I'm an overprotected child, and I am. But sometimes I have my freedom. But that only lasted a while. Some time ago, me and my family went to a city. It's close to ours. We went to visit family. Everything was fine. We had lots of fun and saw my cousins that I haven't seen in a while. We decided to go camping, but we returned to the aunt's house some hours after. A little bit traumatized, but that's another story. But more than traumatized, I was intrigued and I wanted to see and explain what happened in the woods. So I begged my mom to let me stay another day. She said that she and my dad had work the next day. I was on vacation, so I didn't head to school. My aunt then interferes and said that I can stay, that she can take care of me. My parents trusted her. Bad idea. My aunt was a remarried woman, and the guy she married, it was not much to the family's liking. He has lots of money, but he's very arrogant and selfish. Once, we did a party to celebrate my great-granny's 99th birthday at my aunt's house. He got mad and kicked out all of us. Didn't even get to sing happy birthday. But luckily, he was on a business trip, and we were alone, and I always feel something off about him. Everything was good. My cousins and I tried to return to the woods to continue investigating. But for some reason, we got the feeling that we were not going to make it. So we decided to return and go to the cinema. When we get out, it was almost 10 p.m. Called my parents to tell them that I was still there. I wasn't on my way. They said it's okay, but if I was returning home, better do it the next day. That's because it was really late. And it should be clarified that my mother had left me her car so that my cousin could return me, since his car broke down in the accident in the forest. My mother left hers just in case. Me as a very stubborn child, decide to still return that night and don't obey. But first I needed to say goodbye to my aunt and go for some things I left there. At the time we arrived at the house, I only heard shouting from inside the house. One of my cousins covered my ears, but it was in vain. The husband, we call him Choby, he was home. When he saw me there, he freaked out. He started yelling at me that I shouldn't be there, and I was not family, etc. I explained to my aunt and I was taking my leave. She said the same thing my parents said, and I was about to agree until Choby interfered. said that I wasn't allowed to stay in his house for the night, and that I should return home, and I obey him, 'cause I fear Chobi. There's something weird in him that creepy me out. Indeed. When me and my cousin were about to go out to Chobi again, he interfered and said that I'm old enough to be by myself and ride a car. It should be noted that I'm 16 years old and I'm just learning to drive. But since it was night on a not-so-busy road, I could go well. He didn't let my cousin or my aunt come with me. They fear him a lot. He once slapped her. Bastard. Yeah, maybe Chobi gives you everything you need and maintains you. But for that, you'll need to obey him, and if you don't, bear with the consequences. So I packed my things and put them in the car. It was a short ride, like 2 hours. If I go, I could arrive at about 12 a.m. I could surprise my parents because they still worried for me. So my aunt walked me to the car and apologized for the third time. I started to ride and everything was fine. I was slow because I'm still learning. But shortly before I had been on the road for an hour, it started to rain very hard. And the truth is that I felt happy because my city was in a drought, so a rain was something miraculous. So I slowed down a little bit more just to be cautious. But for some reason I got lost and I didn't know where it was anymore. Called my aunt, but nothing. My cousins, I even called Chobi, and I was really stressed because I was alone at night lost. And that's how horror movies begin. I calmed down, I started to drive again. Found a motel in the middle of the road, and it wasn't weird because, well, it was a well-used road. Sometimes of the year. But it should be open, so I went there, and the place looked very run down, but it had a sign saying that there were rooms. I didn't hesitate, I went inside, but for some reason I felt really weird. I didn't care at the time that it was late, it was wet, and I wanted to sleep. I get inside, and there was a receptionist, a woman in her 50s. She looked at me weirded, and after a talk, she told me that she can't do anything. I can't have a room because I'm underage. But at that time, a guy, like in his 20s, came. He said he was the owner. Of course, it was a weird situation. He said that I can have a room, gave me a key with a really creepy smile. I take it and smile awkwardly. The receptionist was there with a really weird face. I was on my way to the room when I heard someone crying. I see at the distance a woman, but I feel that she wasn't normal. Like I said before, I can see dead people, so I know someone is not here. So I ignored her. It's not that I go there and talk with ghosts, so I went to my room. But I couldn't sleep because something was bothering. Then I started to hear whispers. That is normal, to be honest, because normally I have my earplugs and I can't hear anything anymore. But I could still hear a voice saying, "Get out of here." And that's when I decided to listen and went out. Went to the car and stayed there for a moment. Then I saw it, the quote-unquote owner trying to get inside my room. Had a key, and when he entered, he saw I wasn't there, and he rushed outside and started to scream. Heading to my car, I rapidly hid in the lower part. He peeked inside, and the fear was killing me. And little by little, the tears began to come out. I had to get out of there as fast as possible. He didn't saw me. Lucky me, I guess. I called my grandpa, a police chief. He said he would do anything possible to save me, but I needed to get away from there as soon as the quote-unquote owner left. I saw the gold opportunity to go in front and ride as fast as I could, but there was a problem. I left the keys in the room. I started to cry more when I heard tapping on the window. It was the receptionist. I thought I was going to die there. I thought it was the end. But then she showed the key and left them there, and she helped me. She saved me. The quote-unquote owner started to return to screaming. I peeked, and he got really mad. He then cursed and sees the quote-unquote ghost woman in the pool. The man rushes there. I don't know if he was thinking it was me, but my opportunity to get the keys and knew where I was. I saw the car passing beside me and returning where it came. I stopped the cat and started crying out loud, and it was the most terrific day ever. I arrived home. I told him everything just like in the clown thing. My grandpa immediately investigated. After some weeks, the guy was arrested, and turns out he was a fugitive. He raped women and came to kill 2. I suspect that one of them was the crying woman. When I asked him about the receptionist, he told me that in there they found the guy alive. He asked me then how did the woman looked. I gave a description. His face turned pale immediately. He showed me a picture asking if that was the woman. I said, yeah, it was her, but looked more healthy in the pic and more happy. Turns out that she was the last victim. He killed her and she was dead. I was going to be raped, maybe also killed, and I was saved by ghosts, by spirits. Sometimes I said that my gift of seeing paranormal things is a curse, but sometimes I feel like a blessing. I could have been dead, but I survived thanks to spirits. Maybe this isn't so paranormal, but like I've said before, you should be afraid of the living, not the dead people. I would call that a blessing if there ever was one. And I hope some of you, well, don't have something similar, but hope you all have a blessed evening. Sweet dreams.